morning, everybody. It is New Year's Eve day, the last day of 2017, meaning tomorrow, as day breaks, the class of 2018 are no longer on deck. They are stepping up into the batter's box, and it's their turn inside the arena that we call the AT. Watched a lot of videos this week, as y'all know. I do a lot of commenting on there. I just enjoy it, but I've had some thoughts bouncing around in my brain after seeing a couple of your videos this week of some really good things you folks are doing. It's impressive. It makes all of us proud that you're taking it so serious. And in the end, all most of us want is just for you to be able to enjoy the 2,200 mile journey. Enjoy the moments within that 2,200 mile journey, and then live the experience of being on top of Katahdin and kissing the sign. So this week we're going to talk a little bit about risk on the AT. Now, this won't be a traditional talk about risk in a lot of senses. I'm going to bring in some knowledge from some books and some thoughts using some experiences that I had on the trail. These are all the things that have brought me to want to talk about this subject this week, and I think it's a good time, as some of you are. I think Bearded Servant said he was 62 days away from his start date yesterday, which is close. And a shout out to Teardrop, who is starting his flip-flop tomorrow in West Virginia. And if anybody has looked at the weather forecast, they know how risky that is as well. So Teardrop, we are rooting for you. Stay warm. Get off the trail if you need to, man. Okay, risk on the AT. Why should we even consider it? It exists, right? We all know that. There's tons of risk associated with the challenge that you folks are going to undertake. This risk causes a lot of us a lot of anxiety, and then others are able to just kind of push it out of their mind and just say, man, like, I'll handle it when it comes up. Some of us, like me, I like to prepare a little bit more. Some folks like Joyful Rambler. If you saw her video this week, I thought it was really good, and it's a really good window into her and what makes her comfortable mentally. And she prepares a lot. And I also like some of her thoughts of how she likes to prepare her gear. She likes to deal with gear issues better because that's tangible. She can see the results. She can measure those things. And then when you start getting into doing the planning side of a through hike, man, there's so many variables that factor into the equation that it's just hard to wrap your brain around. Are you making any progress? And you can see her, I wouldn't say struggle with it, it's just challenging her, and it challenged me, and it challenges a lot of us who are more conscientious planners. What I told her in comments this week was, and really it's a message to the community of, hey, no matter what it takes, there's no reason to say, hey, Joyful Rambler, you're planning too much. You should just go with the flow. I would say that's where we get into trouble, right? With, hey, I'm going to tell you what's best for me, so that should be best for you. Giving advice is good. Take it or leave it, use it or lose it, like I always say. But just know, in my opinion, that's what makes Joyful Rambler feel comfortable. That's what's going to give her a mental edge, is that she feels prepared as she steps out on the trail. And she knows that she's got to adapt. As no plan survives first contact. It's going to happen to Joyful Rambler. It's going to happen to everybody. And I think she's well aware. So as long as you're able to adapt inside the moment, those planning exercises that she's going through right now can do nothing but help her. All right. So we know there's a lot of different ways to prepare for the AT, and we're seeing folks go through those right now. But why? Why is it so important to prepare and to try to buy down some of this risk? Well, we know just through statistics that the ATC Conservancy puts out that basically the odds of you accomplishing this goal are stacked heavily in the AT's favor, meaning it's 4-1 against you. The house wins 4 times more than the hiker does in this gamble. So the more things you can do to prepare, the more you can push yourself outside your comfort zone at times, and look at risk in different ways. As you can see on the slide here, that's where some of that magic's going to happen. And we're going to talk about magic today too, and how to not miss it. The journey's length and magnitude of this AT through hike that you're going to experience. Obviously, there's going to be tons of risk associated with it because it's stretched out over 2,200 miles. For some of you, it's going to take 6 months. For some of you, 4 months. For some of you, 7 months. Obviously, I would never say that the longer your trail journey is, the more risk is associated with it, because you could say those who condense their trail down like I did to 113 days, or like Kansas did down to 96 days, they increase their risk level a lot because they're taking chances that others wouldn't. So I don't think your risk measurement it's not related necessarily to the length of time you're on the trail. So keep that in mind. So we're all trying to buy down or manage some of this risk as we prepare and as we begin our through hikes and as we proceed through those 2,200 miles. Some folks are going to spend time and energy prepping their gear, and I see a lot of folks, I say it a lot, about 80% of our time is usually spent on gear, and maybe 20-30% of the time is spent on mental, physical prep. I wish that number was reversed, but that's just early riser's opinion. You guys do what makes you feel comfortable and gets you mentally stable before you step on the trail. Others are going to spend time digging through countless videos, books, online stats, various other sources to try and prepare a game plan that reduces the risk of uncertainty. Knowing that we're only going to be able to reduce that down to just a little, there's still going to be tons of uncertainty. I stepped out on the trail and I still didn't know when I get to the first trail town, how in the heck am I going to get to the hostel or resupply in town? Or, man, you just don't know till you do it. Some of you are going to do mini prep hikes and spend time on the trail in the gym, strengthening those muscles that are going to be responsible for carrying you the 2,200 miles. And let's be honest, 2,200 miles are trail miles. You're going to do 6 months out there, and you're going to walk probably at least 1,000 more miles than that just around towns and getting to other places, going to retrieve water at night, having to take side trails to get down to your shelter. Like 2,200 miles is just part of it. There's a lot of risk that goes into reaching Katahdin above and beyond those trail miles. So in the end, common sense may tell us that, hey, if we do a lot of work now, we can surely buy down most of the risk that's associated with a hike. What do y'all think? Like, would you agree with that? That makes sense, right? I think as we move into the reality of risk, I pulled a quote from The Monk and the Riddle. This is by Randy Komisar, or Komisar, however you say his name. But The Monk and the Riddle is a must-read for anybody, especially it's a business-oriented book, but he uses business in a context that taught him lessons about life and just applying them to the business model. But man, it's a really great book. But here's what he tells people. He is a mentor to those aspiring business acumen that are coming up and trying to start their own business. And this is what he tells them about risk. He tells them, hey, if you're brilliant, 15 to 20% of the risk is removed. You can buy it down just by being smart about what you're doing. If you work hard, in his instance, he's talking about if you work 24 hours a day, if you're tenacious, if you're a go-getter, you can buy down another 15 to 20% of that risk. However, the remaining 60 to 70% of risk will be completely out of your control. That's a scary statistic a little bit, especially for the conscientious planners out there, but let's change that into the hiking context. So you're prepping, you're buying down some of that risk right now, so you're getting yourself smart. You're in the guidebook, you are watching videos, hopefully a lot of early riser videos so we can give money to St. Jude's, shameless plug, but it's for the children. You're doing all those little things to get yourself smart. You're buying down risk. I don't think anybody would argue that. let's say 15 to 20%. Let's use his numbers. You're working hard. You're out doing prep hikes. You're in the gym. You're building up those muscles and the tendons to help you sustain the rigors of the trail to get you to Katahdin. Using his numbers, you're going to buy down about 15 to 20% more of that risk, possibly. However, the remaining 60 to 70% of the risk is completely out of your control. Some could argue a little bit more than that, maybe some less, but the bottom line is there's a significant portion of the risk on this trail that you cannot control. And that's an important stat. That's an important reality to get out of the way now. Just so we can realize that, hey, all our hard work, we're still in danger of slipping one time and hurting ourselves and coming off the trail. This is not to scare you. It's not to make this less enjoyable. It's just to help you grapple with the fact that you can only do so much, and then you've just got to go experience it and let life take over. So what are some of those risks of how we plan? So risk of overplanning. This, I would fall more into this category for sure. And I like to slide on the left the best. Excuse me. Overplanning kills magic. Folks, as you step out on the trail, and I'll use this, what I did every morning, if you at least at the first part of the trail, you sit up in your tent in the mornings, you make your coffee. As soon as that caffeine hits, you got your guidebook out and you just start planning. What am I going to do? Where am I stopping? Where are my water spots? All important things, all that you should take seriously. But as you wrap yourself up into planning and maybe even over planning, think about the things that are fading away in the background. And we're going to talk about the background in a little while with a research study that was done. But think about what's fading away. The cool air that's touching your skin, the fresh air that's coming in your nostrils. Just smells clean, smells like forest. The delicious taste of the coffee or the food that you're eating for breakfast. And maybe for me, the most important was when I learned to just sit in silence and listen to the birds in the morning. It was springtime. The birds are going crazy. Their songs are gorgeous, and their songs change as you get farther north. And the birds, the type of birds change a little bit. It was a magical experience that on the first part of my hike, me over planning in the mornings, we're covering up. So just keep that in mind. There's a balance between figuring out what you need to do and then letting the trail unfold in front of you naturally. And you just got to find that balance. And I'm just bringing this up so hopefully some of you can find that balance quicker, especially those conscientious overplanners. You also got the risk of underplanning. Those who just let the trail unfold naturally and just say, man, I'll make it up when I get there. Hold my beer, watch this. I've always envied this kind of people because they're opposite of me. But you also see in people's videos of where this goes wrong at times. Folks who get to a road intersection, they're out of food, they got their thumb out, nobody's picking them up. They're not sure how far it is into town. They're not sure if they walk into town, is there going to be somewhere to stay or a place to resupply. They haven't watched the weather and they get caught out in a torrential storm on rocks, maybe a thunderstorm. So there's obviously risk of underplanning as well, and folks who have this tendency just have to push themselves out of that comfort zone and discover that they're going to find more magic on the trail if they don't put themselves in these situations and plan just enough to keep in harmony with what the trail's unfolding in front of them. That does take work on the hiker. This isn't something you can just go start walking a trail with no gear and no plan and think you're going to survive. You will not. So we all know there's got to be a little bit of balance, and those underplanners just have to balance a little bit so they're at least aware enough and in tune enough to where they're not missing out on some of the magic because of underplanning. Risk of getting injured. I believe we all suffer from this, right? We're all worried about this. If you're not now, you will be, I promise you, because of the trail. You're going to fall. You're going to get hurt at times. And then you just got to make the decisions. Do I press through or do I come off the trail? If you remember Spielberg, for those of you who watched his amazing through hike, farther north he got, the more worried and anxious he got about getting hurt. And then he falls in Mahusik Notch on video, and he posted that one, and that was scary. It was scary to me because, like, man, it was almost over right there. Like, his whole journey almost ended right there. So it's something we keep in the back of our mind. And here's a couple of incidents that just happened this year on the trail. So we'll watch these videos real quick.
A hiker is recovering this morning.
These are going to be loud. Let me turn it down a little bit so it doesn't blow your eardrums, but you might have to adjust the volume.
After suffering an injury while hiking on the Appalachian Trail on Mount Cube in Orford, Fish and Game officials say the 68-year-old Tennessee man could not walk after he fell and hurt his leg. Yesterday, rescuers carried the man about a half a mile out before he was taken to the hospital.
So Mount Cube, New Hampshire, that's an interesting day. Smarts Mountain is just before that. For those of you who are watching, I think it was day 80-something. For me, it's hard to remember, maybe 90, I don't know. That's where I ate lunch in the tower on top of Smarts Mountain. And luckily it was sunny that day. These are two tough climbs. These are right before you enter the Whites, like the two climbs before you get to Moosilauke, and they are pretty brutal. And Mount Cube is just a boulder scramble all the way up, and if that's wet or icy, that thing can be treacherous. So just some context there. And then here's a video clip that happened this year in the in Maine. As you enter Maine, and you'll see Disciple from the channel Not By Sight who completed his through hike this year. I'll give him a shout out at the end of the video. But living through some of his experiences that happened out there.
I hope everybody's okay. Wow. All right. Hands down, far and away, the worst little piece of trail ever on the Appalachian Trail. Hands down, far and away. Gigantic, massive boulders that are all wet and slippery right before the junction coming back to this. I think it's like Carlo Call Shelter.
That was ridiculously hard to come down right there. There's really no good place to come down. Plus it's starting to rain. Luckily the rocks aren't wet yet. Might want to get somebody to put some handholds or something in here, man. That's dangerous. Anyway, pressing on.
Anyway, a guy named Socks just fell down that 10 feet or something. He's broke his leg. It looks like maybe ribs. He's sitting on a bridge or like a planks back there with some cold water bottles on his leg. Those helicopters were there to try to see about getting him out.
All right, so again, that's Disciple, channel Not By Sight. If you didn't watch his through hike, Disciple is legally blind. So, you know, he can see things, just he is, again, legally blind. Those glasses he have on his head are specially made for him. And watching his journey, he's a Christian, watching his struggles as a Christian man walking the trail is interesting as well. So going over there and check his channel out, man, you will not be sorry. His through hike was awesome. And shout out to his wife, Teresa, too. Yeah, so the risk of getting injured, it's there. And a side bunny trail real quick. Maine, I still say, is the hardest state on the trail. It's probably the most rugged and the most beautiful too. And I keep hearing people get to the 100-mile wilderness and think it's going to be a cakewalk to Katahdin. And folks, the 100-mile wilderness is some of the worst terrain on the trail. So keep that in mind. All you 2018 through hikers, early risers telling you right now, the 100-mile wilderness is not a 100-mile cakewalk to Katahdin. It is brutal, and it will hurt you just as bad as the rest of the trail. I'm back on subject. So what I will tell y'all starting off is, man, I was a strong Really strong guy, both physically and mentally. But I will tell you, I fell a bunch of times and I almost had some hike ending falls. I torqued my left knee twice. The second time was in Maine, just past where Disciple is in that video. And I thought that one did me in. Luckily, my body just was resilient enough, and my recovery and my flexibility regimen, I will always just raise my hand and swear that it's what got me through some of those falls. Your body's going to get tighter and less flexible as you walk. It is a conscious effort and a routine that you must do every day to maintain some flexibility and to keep those knots out of your muscles, because as your muscles tighten up with knots, they get less flexible and they're easier to pull. They're going to start pulling on those tendons. They're going to make your knees hurt. They're going to make your back hurt because they're pulling on everything. They're just compressing in. So rolling those out and getting those knots out just by massaging them can help. But you got to do something to maintain that flexibility. You older folks who are walking the trail, even more key, because just as nature has it, your bodies are already becoming less flexible, more fragile. So you got to do things even more consciously and conscientiously to keep yourself on the trail. That's just early risers' opinion. Use it or lose it. Yeah, so injuries, don't fear it. Don't be anxious about it, because, man, it always seemed to fall the most when I was worried about it the most. But just know that you can do things to buy down some of that risk. Do what you can control, and just be ready to adapt to the trail. All right, moving on. The risk of not experiencing the magic. So another book, The Happiness Advantage by Shawn Achor. I've suggested this to a bunch of my subscribers already, but I love what he said here. I started to realize just how much our interpretation of reality changes our experience of that reality. Now, another way to say that is what we prime ourselves for, what we prime our mind for, how we think about the things in the moment changes the reality we're having right then. So if you look at the pictures on the screen, I picked these. The one in the upper right hand corner, that's date 99 and 100. That's the Mahoosuc Notch. That's what greeted me to enter the toughest mile on the AT. That's what I'm staring at, the very first part of it. Man, I was anxious. I was kind of miserable that day. I just got hurt the night before, and now I got to go through this. Like I'm building this pity party for myself before I even get into the notch. For good reason, because the notch was brutal. But my reality was being altered because I was already dreading it. Mosquitoes up north were terrible. They were negatively affecting my interpretation of reality. The snow in the middle picture on the bottom, the snow and the cold in these Smokies changed my interpretation. Pennsylvania rocks. Most of y'all know that I didn't mind them as bad because I got to slack pack a lot. But these may be the most mentally debilitating items on the entire trail for most hikers, and their interpretation of them changes the reality of their hike. So the bottom line is, and what research is pointing to, and Shawn relays this from the research he studied for his book, but he talks about mental priming. And you guys saw me do this a little bit in the mornings, trying to positively prime my mind for happiness that day and go up and fist bump. The first blaze on the trail was important for me. It primed my mind for happiness and content, and just to be present right now and happy to be where I was. When we invoke a certain mindset of positivity in our brains, it releases dopamine and serotonin. And if you don't know what those are the feel-good drugs that are released inside the brain. Chemicals, if you will. I like to call them drugs, but they're chemicals. And they dial up learning centers of our brain. That's what Shawn tells us. So the release of those chemicals increases your brain's ability to learn and adapt. He says that it helps us organize new info, retain that info longer, and retrieve it faster when we need it. Think about how those things will help you on the trail. So positively priming to help us see more around us. So just by priming yourself positively, you will see more things as you travel through them. This was proven in a study that the University of Toronto did. How they found out how mood can change the visual cortex and how it processes information. The visual cortex is the part of your eye that processes images as they come in. People were primed either negatively or positively. So they took this group of people, they split them apart. They primed some of them negatively by either showing them videos or having them read something that puts them in a negative mood. They did the opposite and primed the other folks positively. And then they showed the groups the same exact pictures. Interestingly enough, the folks that were primed negatively missed a lot of the things that were in pictures when they were questioned about them, especially items in the background of the picture they couldn't recall. The folks who were positively primed saw the entire picture. They could recall almost everything from the background, and they saw more of the picture. Let's translate that to the trail. You wake up, you look at your phone, you're lucky because you got Verizon, you got a little bit of service, and you check the weather in the morning. Hopefully you're not overplanning, you're listening to the birds, but you check the weather, and it's going to pour all afternoon, and there's nowhere to go. You're going to have to walk in it. If you positively prime your mind for that day and realize that, hey, I'm on the trail. There's no better place to be, whether it's raining, snowing, sleeting, doesn't matter. I'm on the trail, and this is going to be a magical experience. Your day is already primed, and your brain is already primed. Your visual cortex is already primed to see more things, experience better things that day. For those of us who say, God, this is going to suck. I'm going to freeze. All my crap's going to get wet. You're already shutting down your visual cortex, what it's going to see and process throughout the day, and you're going to change your reality to a more negative interpretation. The bottom line of this slide is happiness and contentment are a choice, and only you can choose to be either. So keep that in mind as you wake up and things get sucky and the mosquitoes are biting you and you're post-holing in snow. And just realize there's no better place in the world to be than where you are in that very moment. Last but not least, and probably the most important slide of all these, is the risk of not taking the risk. Referring back to The Monk and the Riddle, the first book we talked about by Randy Cosimer, he talks about two life options. The deferred life option and the whole life option. Most of us choose the deferred life option by default because it's kind of how our society has developed. This is the picture on the left from Office Space. This is where we trudge through life, through a job that we're not really passionate about because we got to have money, we got to get the kids to school and to college, we got to pay the mortgage, got to put food on the table. And we're waiting to make it through those years so we can retire and get to do the things we want to do. Then Randy tells us about the whole life option. Whole life option are the people who take the risk and say, you know what, I'm not going to waste my life being miserable. The music's playing today. Why not dance today all the way through my life versus waiting till the last few notes are played and dancing at the end? This is really awakening for me because the Matrix keeps pulling me back in now that I'm off the trail. His tentacles have latched onto me and won't let me back outside. And really my only escape is getting to come on here and interact with you folks and watch you prep and wish I was there again, but I can't be, so I'm going to support you guys. And to me, that's my new hobby, and it pulls me out of the Matrix for a minute. So all of you out there, and I said all that to say this. Class of 2018 are building. Some of them are retired and they waited. Some of them are taking the whole life option and saying, you know what? I walked into the boss and said, boss, man, I'm going to go do this. I hope you support it because I want to come back and be a part of your company. But if not, man, I'm going to do it anyway because it's that important. I will just tell you that the trail is going to take care of you. And I understand the folks who just can't do that right now, but I will tell you, when can you? We all have to ask ourselves. Yeah, maybe some of us are lucky and we had jobs that would take us back, and our employers were very flexible and amenable to us doing this. But in the end, you just got to figure out for yourself of, am I going to stay on the deferred life option or take the whole life option? I've taken a whole lot of risk in my life. You could say I'm probably like a rush chaser. I've got over 1,000 skydives. I've been in combat in 5 different countries. Lucky to survive some of those firefights. I have walked the Appalachian Trail in 113 days. That was above, and that stands out maybe because of recency's relevancy, but that adventure was, bar none, probably my favorite. But even the rush seeker still gets sucked in to the matrix, and I got to keep pushing myself towards that whole life option. So anyway, the bottom line, as it says on the screen, is if you're going to die today, if you were on your deathbed right now, and tomorrow you don't have, can you say that you've lived every day for the moment, doing something that you love, or are you waiting for some future time where you might get to do it, if there's any time left? I'll leave this slide with that. So all of this today, this long diatribe, as you guys have known Early Riser to be very long-winded, but we've reached the final slide. And all of it is to say this: those who are able to take the leap, let go of the deferred life option, take the whole life option, or those who are just willing to go out and take the first steps of a 2,200-mile journey toward this magical place that grows even more mystical as you're moving towards it. Those who navigate that 60 to 70% of the risk successfully, in large part because they did what they could. They controlled the pieces that they could control. They gave them a better advantage inside the 60 to 7% that they couldn't control. Those folks get the best gift of all. Those folks get to stand on top of this mountain and read this sign. And it's been painted since this picture, but I really love this picture. And they get to walk up to this sign, hopefully on their own terms. If they want to be alone, hopefully alone. If they want to be with people, there will be tons of people. And they'll get to go up and grasp a hold of it and kiss it if they want, stand on it if they want. But knowing that they walked 2,200 miles plus to get here. And they beat the odds, those 4-to-1 odds. There's nothing quite like it in the world. And we're going to build a community behind you, the vlogging class of 2018, and give you every chance possible to stand on top of this rock outcropping and kiss that sign. All right, y'all. Hope y'all have a great week. Happy New Year 2018. Time to step into the batter's box and do this. Deuces, y'all.